Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee of Bath and North East Somerset Council on the 20th of September 2023, being held in the Guildhall, Bath. My name is Councillor Duncan Hounsell, and I am chair of the committee. I will now ask the officers on the top table to introduce themselves. Please can I remind everyone to switch their phones, iPads and laptops to silent during the meeting. The meeting is being filmed and the recording will be available on the Council's website. Anybody speaking that does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator behind me. Now, if people on the top table could introduce themselves. Thank you.
I'm Karina Haskins from Democratic Services.
Chris Gom, one of the team managers in Development Management.
Simon Elias, a senior lawyer in the Place Legal team.
Thank you. The Democratic Services Officer, Karina Haskins, will now read out the emergency evacuation procedure.
Thank you, Chair. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. From this room, you use the main door and then the main exit of the building. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove, on the green, outside Browns. Thank you.
The Democratic Services Officer will now give details of any apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any?
We have no apologies for absence. Thank you.
Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. None declared. Urgent business agreed by the Chair. I have no urgent business. So we move on to statements and questions and items from the public. The Democratic Services Officer will inform us now of the public speaking procedure.
Thank you. Speakers will be called to speak immediately after the case officer has made their presentation about the application. The order of speakers and the time allowed for speaking will be as follows. Any parish town council representatives will speak first and be allowed 3 minutes. Objectors to an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Supporters of an application will be allowed 3 minutes in total. Ward councillors who are not on the committee but have indicated that they wish to speak may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. Speeches will be timed by the traffic light system you can see on the table next to me. At the start, the light will be green and it will turn to amber when there's 1 minute of speaking time remaining. When the light turns red, speakers should immediately conclude their remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll hear from the public speakers later at the appropriate moment. Minutes of the previous meeting, 23rd of August. The minutes have been circulated. Are these approved as a correct record? Councillor... thank you, Councillor Jackson, and seconded by Councillor Halsall. Right. There are no site visit applications for consideration today. We now move on to the mains plans list, and the first planning application that we're considering is 23/00660/FUL, Pixash Business Centre, Pixash Lane, Keynsham, Bristol. And I now invite the officer, Chris Gom, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a full planning application seeking consent to erect a pair of industrial units on the Pixash Lane industrial estate on the edge of Keynsham. Use classes that are sought are B2, B8 and EG. B2 is general industrial, B8 is storage and distribution, and the new class EG is light industrial and commercial offices. So the application site is here on the edge of the industrial estate. Just to help locate the site, this is the main A4 Bath Road here and the beginning of the Keynsham bypass here. This is Pixash Lane, coming in here from the main road. This is the site of the council's new Pixash Lane recycling centre, and there's also a new care home, which I'm sure people will be familiar with, on the corner here. So as you come into Pixash Lane, the application site really is the first cluster of buildings that you come to on the left-hand side of the road, which is served by its own access here from Pixash Lane, rather from the main route through the industrial estate. So just moving in a bit closer, you can see this is the site of the new Pixash Lane recycling centre. This photograph's a few years old. On this site here is the new, or relatively new, care home on the corner here. So as I said, this is really the first cluster of industrial buildings that you come to on the left as you come into Pixash Lane. This is Wessex House, which is a office building immediately to the right there, to the east. And then this is Proximity House, which is a commercial building, industrial building, to the west here. Here are the residential properties which face the Bath Road, with their rear gardens and rear access road there to the immediate south of the application site. So the proposal itself is to erect a pair of industrial units on this area here, which is currently occupied by lawn, landscaping, and the access itself into this car park. So moving on to the site plan, and this is the most recent landscaping plan. So you can see what's proposed is this rectangular building here. It's facing into the reordered car park here, Proximity House beyond the red line here to the west, Wessex House, the office building, as you can see here, to the east, and the building abuts or closely abuts the access way into the Pixash Business Centre, and you can see to the south here there's an area of lawn that's retained with some additional and new planting. The access road, which is currently here, obviously needs to be, is as part of this proposal, is relocated further to the west to provide access to both the car park serving Proximity House and the new industrial units. So that's a crucial part of the proposal, that access is being relocated. Moving on to the elevations, as I mentioned, it's a pair of semi-detached, in effect, industrial units. So an industrial unit either side. Profiled metal materials in grey or contrasting shades of grey. So there's anthrite grey and albatross grey on the main buildings, and then as you can see, full height roller shutter doors, and the building also, or both units also include a mezzanine. So there's a first floor, as you can see here, lit by these windows, and on the other elevations here. The floor plans, as you'd expect, really, as I mentioned, a pair of semi-detached industrial units, staircases up to the mezzanine level, and kitchen and toilet facilities beneath the stairs, in effect. And you can see the roller shutter doors there. So moving on to the photographs, this is the view across that across the grassed area towards the neighbouring industrial building. So this is looking north from the southern boundary, or close to the southern boundary of the site, looking north towards one of the neighbouring buildings. So the proposed industrial unit would, in effect, occupy most of the field of vision there, erected here, facing the left-hand side of the photograph there. This is looking back the other way, so you can see the properties in Bath Road here. This is Wessex House, the office building. So the proposed industrial building would be situated on this lawn, or on part of this lawn, filling most of what is currently shown in that photograph. This shows the boundary with Wessex House. The proposal includes an 8 metre separation distance between the facing face of Wessex House and the back of the industrial building. So the industrial building would stand here on this lawn. This is from a slightly different position, again looking towards Wessex House. Importantly, in this photograph, you can see the access that will need to be stopped up, and then the new industrial building erected centrally in this photograph here. So this access, as I mentioned, would be relocated further to the west. This is a photograph looking east, again, towards Pixash Lane. You can see the new recycling centre in the distance there. This is Wessex House. So the access would be, as I've mentioned, stopped up and the new industrial building erected to the right of this HGV here. And this is from the same position, but looking in the opposite direction. The application site is to the left here, beyond this hedge. So the industrial building would be located in here and the access resited. So the officer recommendation, Chair, is to grant permission for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you very much. We move on now to statements from public speakers and ward councillors. Just a reminder that this is an opportunity to speak and not to show us any extraneous extra material. So the first person I'd like to call forward is Chris Beaver, who is going to speak objecting to the proposal.
Working okay? Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I am representing the neighbouring landowner and tenants of Ridge Mill Properties Limited, who own the internal access road that connects the application site to Pixash Lane. The internal access road serves a number of existing commercial business occupiers, including the Bottle Company, Bath and Bristol Services, Rough Tracks and DataQuest, all of whom are united in their objection to this proposal and consider that the inadequate proposed access arrangements pose a direct threat to the operation of their respective businesses. This is a tight-knit community of local businesses who cooperate with each other over the shared access and parking arrangements, and you can see from the photos how congested it is. What is particularly disappointing in this case is that the applicant did not undertake any pre-application consultation with the adjacent business owners and tenants prior to the submission of the current application. Furthermore, the existing operation of the internal access road relies on a covenant that was agreed in 1997 that requires the existing access turning head to be kept clear at all times. This covenant was signed by the applicant, but was not disclosed in the application submission. We have sent a copy of this to the planning officer. If the proposal is implemented, the new access, which the applicant suggests could function as a turning head, is located further to the west, and we consider that it won't be able to adequately accommodate turning of HGVs due to the presence of existing parked cars and the conflicts that will inevitably arise with existing adjacent occupiers. The owner of the Bottle Company, who are sort of opposite the existing turning head, have particular concerns around their frequent HGV deliveries to their premises, as their entrance is directly opposite the turning head. If the proposal is implemented, they believe that the HGV deliveries will have to reverse out onto Pixash Lane, which will create a clear highway safety conflict and hazard. Our clients and their tenants would support a revised proposal that would leave the existing access and turning head in situ. This, I would suggest to you, could be achieved by removing Unit 1 from the proposal, so effectively just going for one half of what's on the table. This would enable the existing turning head protected by the covenant to stay in situ. We therefore recommend that the committee consider instructing officers to negotiate this compromise through a deferral. However, if the applicant is unwilling to do this, then we consider that there are legitimate planning grounds to refuse on highway safety on grounds of conflicts with policy ST7. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for keeping to time. I now call Mike Taylor, who's speaking in support of the application.
Good morning, everybody, members of the committee. My name is Mike Taylor of Angus Meek Architects, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the applicant in support of this application. We'd like to thank the case officer, Ben Burke, for his thorough work associated with this application. We've been liaising with the local authorities to find the best way forward for this scheme, and Ben's time and effort have been appreciated. Whilst we acknowledge there are private matters to be agreed between adjacent occupants and owners on the wider Pixash industrial estate, we would like to highlight that the case officer's recommendation is for approval. We would also like to add that our client has cooperated with the various planning items raised throughout this application by consultees, and amendments have been made to adjust the proposals accordingly. In particular, the Highways Authority have been consulted twice during the course of this application, and both times have responded with no objection to the planning application proposals subject to usual conditions. During consultation, the Highways Authority have stated the development would have an immaterial impact on the operation of the surrounding highway network. The scheme clearly demonstrates that the policy-compliant parking levels would be appropriate, and the transport statement submitted as part of the application clearly demonstrated that the proposed site layout could accommodate turning manoeuvres required for rigid, heavy goods vehicles. In addition, we would also like to emphasise that the relocated entrance into the applicant's site would provide an adequate alternative turning facility for articulated vehicles on the estate road as part of the existing situation, as per the existing situation. Following discussions with the case officer, the proposed building has been moved away from Wessex House by a further 4 metres, providing an 8-metre separation distance between the buildings. This separation distance will ensure that Wessex House maintains appropriate levels of privacy, outlook and natural light appropriate for an office building. Finally, it's worthy of note that in 2008, this site was granted planning permission for the erection of a new light industrial unit with 2-storey offices of similar massing. This consent was not implemented, but reinforces the suitability for development on this site. In summary, this is a proposed commercial development on commercial land with the support of the case officer and a recommendation for approval. If this application is granted, it will provide additional jobs for local people and will assist further economic development in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor, and thank you for keeping to time. I now call Councillor Andy Waite, local ward member.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see some fresh faces. It's been a while since I've been. I always look forward to these visits. I am a Keynsham Town Councillor as well as being a Baines Ward Councillor. The reason why the Town Council approved the application was, I suspect, because their meeting was on the 7th of March 2023, which was too early for the Baines schedule, and their decision was made before any objections were registered. However, they did have a concern about the B2 classification being so close to residential housing, and this concern I also share. One of my main objections to this application is overdevelopment. I'm disappointed that the photograph in the presentation is out of date, so the committee has a false view of the crowded nature of the site and does not show many of the recent developments that have occurred there. I've spoken before about the difficulties along the A4 and the problems of HGVs on a busy, dangerous road, which is also a route where a large number of children make their way to school. There is the unfinished Higger development. The Withy's Park development plan has now been approved for more housing, meaning that even more traffic on the A4 than there is now. Very close by is the new recycling centre, which is coming into full operation, and the Meriton nursing home is now in full operation. The last things local residents and local businesses want is even more HGVs. Pixash Lane and Ashmead Road, already have a large number of successful businesses and community facilities that manage to exist well and successfully together. This application and the type of business proposed is one business too many, and it will have a detrimental effect on those other businesses already in the location. You have seen from the large list of objectors and their very sound reasons for making these objections. Some say if this application goes through, their business will suffer damage and may go bankrupt. That doesn't sound like a good outcome to me. I would like to suggest that any planning committee's loyalty would be to the current local businesses who have created existing employment opportunities for local people, rather than a potential newcomer who may lead to other employment being terminated. Any application involving HGVs should have a detailed swept path analysis, precisely where the HGVs will be operating, for the application to be approved. It is a weakness in the application that there is no such analysis that has been made at the actual location. There is in the application some observation of articulated movement in another location, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There has been a right-of-way across the site for 80 years for the turning of vehicles. Additionally, a covenant was agreed in 1996 and signed by the applicant, as Chris Beaver stated in his words to the committee. This covenant requires access at all times. It is likely that if these plans are approved, this covenant will be broken. Keynsham business community have made their opinions very clear from the remarks of Chris Beaver. They have put forward an alternative proposal to accommodate the new business. My recommendation is to the Planning Committee that you should turn down this application. If you are so minded, you could defer the application to make a site visit, to fully understand the effect of this application and see the new developments around the area for yourselves and also the general traffic on existing operations and how the alternative proposal put forward by the local businesses could work in practice by removing Unit 1 from the proposal and retaining the turning head that is protected by the covenant in Instu. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waite. Thank you to all the speakers. We now move to inviting members to ask questions of the case officer. So who would like to start? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I wondered if the council, and thanks for the exposition to the officer, that's thanks to the officer, but there are one or two things I'm not quite clear about. We've got reference in the papers to a tree that's called T2 and for which there's going to be a mitigation of planting alternative trees, but there's also a reference to a T11. I wondered if the officer could explain a bit more fully exactly, because I can't see from here, which tree is which and what is going to be done in mitigation. That's the first question. And my second question concerns cycles. I gather there are proposed to have, but it might have been in a previous application, I'm not quite clear from the papers, 10 dedicated cycle stands or some sort of secure cycle access. I would think this is, particularly in view of the light of the policies that the Council's developing, particularly important. So I wondered if you could explain about cycle access and cycle storage on the site, please. Thank you.
While Chris is looking up trees, in terms of cycle access, there will be 10 cycle spaces provided in a secure unit as part of the development. That's confirmed, yes.
Are we sure they're not going to get knocked over by an HGV turning? Unfortunately, we seem to have lost the signal, because it would have been helpful if you could have indicated how a cycle would access the site and where it would be.
I can show you that in a minute. Chris is just looking up trees as well at the same time, so he's multitasking. But yeah, they are in a corner and they shouldn't be affected by HGV turning.
Bear with me, Chair. I just need to look up the answers to those queries in the arboricultural appraisal. I should have those details in a moment.
Yeah, I think we'll just wait patiently. There's no hurry. Feel no pressure.
Just to clarify, Councillor Jackson, which trees exactly were you referring to?
Roman script. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I've managed to locate the tree plan. Well, tree T2 is down here on the corner of the site. T11 is at the top of the site here. You bear with me a sec. I need to cross-reference. Yeah, so the tree at the top is being removed, and I believe that we can just see the top of the tree at the bottom there. So there is some tree removal. There is also some tree retention. You can see on this drawing here, on the boundary here and along the southern boundary here, there's some tree retention. But in terms of replacement planting, we can see on this drawing, there's some replacement planting within the boundary hedgerow and within the landscaped area to the south of the building. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor.
And the question about bicycles and where they will be kept?
Yep, Chris is highlighting the bicycle and refuge storage area at the moment on the southern part of the site. So it's hopefully out of the way of any turning movements for vehicles.
Satisfied with that for the moment, Councillor Jackson? Yep. Right. Councillor Warren, followed by Councillor Crossley.
Yeah, I'd just like a little bit more about the legalities of the turning circle, if we can.
That was my question as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. I think there may be sort of two elements to that question. So if we deal with them sort of one at a time, one is the issue of covenants. So can I ask the legal officer to just remind us or advise us on the consideration we should have, if at all, of the covenants in place?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Might I offer members this? Planning decisions concerned with the land use in the public interest, not private interests. So if you're talking about internal access road covenant, that would come under the heading of a private interest, which is not a material planning consideration. So my advice would be that that in itself cannot be taken into account. So generally speaking, with all planning decisions, if say a planning permission is granted and there is some restriction on the use of that land, which is a private agreement between the landowner and another party, then it's a matter for them whether they can implement the planning permission or not.
And I think the second element of the question, and Councillor Warren can correct me if I've not got this right, is about the swept path analysis for HGVs, whether it's taken, a similar exercise has taken place for articulated lorries, just to hear from highways about the movements of vehicles. Is that okay?
Yeah, mine was just about the covenant, actually. But I think that was Hal's the second bit.
So in terms of HGV movements, this on the screen at the moment is an appendix from the transport statement, which shows turning plots for HGVs within the revised site. So it shows that the buildings themselves can be adequately accessed by heavy goods vehicles. The concern raised by third parties relates to the movement, the change of the location of the spur road into the site itself, and the ability to turn HGVs on the main access road. There are no swept path analysis of that, but having reviewed in my professional opinion, there is no reason why an HGV could not turn in the repositioned access road.
Right, can I just ask why there hasn't been a swept path analysis and why articulated lorry movements haven't been sort of modelled?
I haven't seen a submission from the applicant, so it's been an issue that's been raised, but there's been no submission.
I didn't quite follow that. Could you just say that again, but more slowly and perhaps slightly different words?
Well, it's been raised as an issue as part of the application process that hasn't been demonstrated, but there's been no submission from the applicant that shows that.
Right, so it's not been demonstrated?
No, correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Halsall.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Just as a point of order through you, I keep hearing a bleep. It's like someone's getting messages constantly. Can we just all check our phones are all switched off? Because it's quite distracting. I'm not sure if it's in the room or not, but if we could please just check that. Can I just ask a basic question? What is the difference between an HGV and an articulated lorry, please?
They are the same thing. An HGV can be an articulated lorry as well. So articulated lorry is one that bends between the cab and the trailer. There's also rigid HGVs which don't, which are like smaller size. So you can have a rigid HGV or an articulated HGV. They're just a different size of large vehicle.
So the swept path analyses that have been submitted relate to the smaller heavy goods vehicles, stroke HGV, stroke articulated lorry.
They relate to a rigid HGV,
a rigid one. Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the swept path of an articulated HGV is any worse.
Could I just ask about the covenant and the route again? I know it's we can't give it any weight, but I just wanted to understand the route that is being described that is used by the other businesses. I mean, I think I know what you mean, but I just want to be clear on it. And the area that is covenanted for those other businesses to be able to turn, if that's what I understood, or the area that's covenanted.
Yeah, in terms of how I've assessed the application, the covenant has got no bearing on my assessment at all. But Chris is showing on the plan at the moment, that access road there is used for HGV turning. And then in the new proposal, that would be closed and there'd be a new access immediately to the west, which would have to replicate that.
So I just wanted to understand the concerns of the businesses that have raised about their access. Sorry, I'm not allowed to be shown any. I wanted to understand the point that was made by one of the speakers about how their access to the other businesses might change. I think I understand it, but I just want to be clear.
At the moment, they use the access that's shown on that drawing, on the plan, sorry, and in the future they'd have to use the revised spur that's part of the new access arrangements.
And the covenant protects, relates to the whole of the previous access?
I haven't got that information. It's not part of the application.
Just to say that Councillor Waite, just given me a piece of paper. I've not looked at it. I know Councillor Waite's been trying to be helpful, but it's important that that nothing is shown to me that isn't available to everybody else. So I haven't looked at it. Okay. The next question from Councillor Simon.
Thank you, yes. Firstly, on the Arctic lorries, is the length of a 44-tonne Arctic the same as the rigid one that has been analysed, or is it saying that only a shorter rigid one could be sure to be turned rather than a full-length Arctic. And then I wanted to explore with the planning case officer the use classes that are proposed. B8 and E probably don't have externalities, but B2 might involve processes that have externalities. Do we know whether there are specific tenants and whether there are sufficient controls on noise, dust and other externalities if we allow B2?
Yeah. Councillor Simon, just before the case officer answers your questions, people might not have heard, particularly on the webcast, so could you repeat the questions directly into the microphone?
I'm sorry about that, yes. First question was about the length of the Arctic that could turn. Is it the same as the rigid that was analysed? And the second is what externalities might result from a B2 use, and are they sufficiently controlled?
Thank you.
In terms of the sweat path analysis, the rigid vehicles are shorter than articulated lorries. The articulated lorry could be up to 16 metres. The ones that have been assessed in the sweat path are 12 metres. However, as mentioned before, that doesn't necessarily mean an articulated lorry turning is significantly worse because they're designed to turn in similar spaces.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Simon? Thank you. Right, I have a question. It's also to do with planning uses. Yes. There's a second question, right. So I think we're still awaiting a response for the second question of Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of use class B2, that which is permission for which is being sought, that is general industrial. So it is a very broad scope. We don't know what exactly the final uses the end users will be in the event that permission is granted. So there is an element of uncertainty there, and that's really very often the case where permission is granted for a particular use class. But what we do know here is that we've suggested a number of conditions to mitigate any future or potential future impact. So condition 6 deals with plant noise, cumulative plant noise. There are also, well, it doesn't relate to operational matters, but there are also conditions relating to the construction management in order to minimise impact on the neighbours and so on. But in terms of the B8 use, as I say, it is very broad. We don't know specifically what the end user will be, but as officers, we're content that a B2 use is appropriate on that site, given its industrial context. It's noted, of course, that there are residential properties nearby, but it's felt that they are sufficiently distant, and in combination with the condition dealing with noise limits, it's felt that the impact on those neighbours will be acceptable in planning terms.
If I can just follow that up with my own question about planning classes. B2, as you state, is general industrial, and that includes industrial processes. Now, the current applicants possibly don't particularly want to have an industrial process, but once it's got the category of B2, owners in the future might change the use. And I know in Keynsham that there's concern about a concrete making sort of factory, if you like, near to residential properties. Now, if it has the B2 designation, does that mean at some point in the future it's conceivable that a process like that could be placed in this location?
Thank you, Chair. Use class B2, there are permitted, it is permitted, there's permitted change, permitted development to change to some other uses some of the uses that used to fall within Class B1, and change of use to B8 is permissible. I mean, obviously, those are within the scope of the permission anyway. In terms of change to a concrete batching plant or something similar, I would have to check the details, but I believe that that would be a sui generis use. But I would have to check exactly what use class that falls within, Chair.
Just one follow-up question to that. If the committee was minded to approve the application but did not want the Class B2 included, would that be an acceptable decision? Would that be a legal decision to exclude one use class?
I think if the committee were minded to go that way, I think the best course of action would be to defer the application so that that possibility could be discussed with the agent, because clearly permission has been sought for a B2 use, and I imagine that goes to the heart of the strategy on this site in terms of letting the final building. So in the first instance, I would recommend deferring the application for further discussions to take place, and then take it from there, really, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gawley.
Some of the neighbours have been very concerned about being overlooked at the back, and I'm just wondering what mitigations there are for that.
Thank you, Chair. If I revert to the site plan, or aerial photo rather, I believe the distance between the site and the rear walls or rear face of these properties in Bath Road is 27 metres. So that in planning terms, that's more than sufficient to ensure that overlooking doesn't occur. And of course, it's an industrial building that it's only occupied during the daytime generally, and with a limited number of first floor windows. So in terms of overlooking and loss of privacy, there's no concern from officers there.
Councillor McPhee.
Could we see the swept path analysis again? While they're doing that, I would just say you did see the HGV that belonged to the other site, and you see you had a forklift, and you see the amount of space that you need on the site.
Sorry, Councillor McPhee, could you speak directly into the microphone? It's some way away from you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask the question here. I particularly look at the refuse vehicle, 11.2 metres, and I see the edge really is very tight against the parked cars there. And I put it to you that once it's there as well, there's no chance of a forklift unloading from the side.
Right.
For a curtain.
Can you make that into a question?
Well, I'm asking him, do you agree?
It does depend on where you would unload on the site. I think there are opportunities to unload. I think in the southwest corner there is more space either side of the vehicle, and if you chose to park your lorry there, or HGV there, then there would be opportunities to unload.
So that's number one. I personally...
Sorry, we don't want to know what you personally think at this moment.
I want to make a question. Do you agree that it... Well, I'm trying to find some words here. Yeah.
Perhaps come back later in the debate. Right, we're still with questions, so Councillor Simon.
Thank you. Yes, I just like to go back to externalities if we have B2 use. I can see that, yes, there's a noise control, but there isn't any control on dust, smells, other emissions. So how would those, other than the general law of nuisance, how would those be assessed if the processes involved some such potential emissions?
Thank you, Chair. That's correct. There's no further controls recommended as part of this particular recommendation. And that's really, well, firstly, it's because the Environmental Protection Team didn't recommend any, but also there's not enough specific information about the end users to be able to confidently control those matters, because those types of conditions are structured in a way which work quite differently to noise limit conditions and need to be tailored to the circumstances, really. So that matter's not part of this recommendation. There are other permitting regimes which govern certain uses under environmental regulations, but that does depend on what the final user or what the final use is. So whether they would be caught by those regulations, it's impossible to say at the moment. But coming back really to my main point, we're content as officers that the B2 use here and the other uses proposed is sufficiently distant from the residential properties so as not to cause an issue.
Sorry to come back in. Would it be possible to put in a condition along the lines of before the property is occupied, an assessment should be made of the potential externalities of the use to which it is to be put, and this should be submitted to the council for, and to the satisfaction of officers? That sort of condition.
Thank you, Chair. I think, obviously, as officers, we don't consider that to be necessary, but I think a condition that requires a user to submit information about the use itself and any sort of emissions that may result, I think a condition could be imposed of that nature. I mean, we'd obviously have to think very carefully about how that was worded and what we actually do with that information once we've received it. But I think, in theory, yes, a condition of that nature could be imposed.
Any more questions? Councillor Hodge.
Sorry, I just had a question about a condition on the hours of operation of the site. Is there any, could you put that could you have a condition on that just to make sure it is within, I don't know whether that particular site has constraints on it already about when it could be operated, but would it be worth adding a condition about that, just preempting that it might be operated later in the evening?
Thank you, Chair.
Actually, I didn't quite catch the
question was, could we, would it be appropriate to add a condition about the hours of operation for that particular site as well, for the assurance of the nearby residents?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, an hours of operation condition could be imposed. As officers, as I've said, we don't consider that's necessary because of the site's context and its nature. But if the committee felt that was necessary, a condition of that nature could be imposed. I think if the committee were minded to go down that route, I think it would need to be discussed between officers and the applicant so that we can understand what their sort of expectations are in terms of the hours of operation.
Any more questions? Right, we'll move to the debate. Can I just ask that if anybody's minded to argue for a site visit or a deferral, that you raise that quite quickly, just for the efficiency of the discussion. So, who would like to begin? Councillor Hughes. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's because I've been dazzled by Councillor Waite. Is that I forgot that you're also the ward member. Councillor McPhee.
Thank you very much. So let's just deal with the idea of overdevelopment. My view is that if you look at the swept path analysis, you not only can't get something bigger than a rigid or a refuse vehicle, but you can't unload it from the side because there are those two there. And so you're left with unloading out of the back. If you went down to one unit, that wouldn't happen. You would have more than enough room to manipulate an articulated lorry. So from my case, looking at the swept analysis, it seems clear to me that they're trying to put too much in. When we come to the B2, as you will know, we have suffered not just with the concrete, but with also another business that is sending out wagons early in the morning. And even though there's 27 metres there, the reversing alarm that you get at 4 o'clock in the morning when it sets off is very disturbing. And there are many other examples of that. Pipes landing on the floor, waking up people at that 27-metre level. So if you want notice of deferral, everyone in Keynsham will support the deferral. If by some unfortunate means the B2 stays, then we do need to have the conditions. We need the hours controlled, and we need very clear understanding of what noise. Now, we may not get a concrete mixer, but we could get a similar type of business where articulated lorries are coming in, unloading, lots of light goods vehicles are coming in and out. And I just don't see that working. They're going to have to go past that lorry that you saw with the unloading the next door. It's going to be a disaster. So I would certainly apply to have B2 excluded.
Is Councillor McPhee moving?
Yes, that's what I'm just going, because there were two things there. One is you seem to be moving a motion for deferral, and then you were speaking about excluding B2 or concerns about B2. So we just need to be clear. Are you putting forward a motion for deferral?
If that's how it goes forward, yes.
Right. Is there a seconder for that?
Chair,
Yeah.
I think there are too many uncertainties at the moment, and though from the questions that have been asked, officers have already clarified that if we wanted to impose an hour restriction or we wanted to remove B2, we can't do it in this forum. It would have to be deferred for the officers to go back to the applicants and negotiate that. So I would second a motion to defer.
Right. I think it will be important that we're very clear to the officers what it is we expect to happen should the committee decide to defer, so the officers know what they're tasked to do before the application returns. We do have a motion on the table. It has been seconded to defer. Who would like to speak to that motion? So Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I will support the deferral, bordering on refusal, to be honest, at this stage. If we're going to defer, I would like the developer to provide a swept path analysis for 16-metre vehicles. I would like somehow to demonstrate that there isn't a negative impact on the existing businesses, and that the trading of the existing business is still viable in terms of loading and unloading. Obviously, the review of B2, and I'd also like them to some clarification on the access road, on the ownership of the access road and the ability to develop the access road. So there would be 4 points that I would like to see in a deferral, but I certainly support it, yes.
Councillor Jackson.
We don't very often do a deferral, and I am not clear why it's not possible to either, on this application as this stands, to vote to refuse it for reasons which various speakers have given, which may or may not be appropriate, but, you know, either to go for a refusal or, since it's obviously lacking information, such as the swept path, to go for a delegate to permit. What is the difference between a delegate to permit to try and get these issues sorted out, which are of quite considerable importance, and a deferral when presumably it's all going to come back again? And meanwhile, I think the actual principle of development on this site is a reasonable one, but I'm far from clear, not being a driver or not knowing anything about HGVs very much, that this is an adequate site. So can we have some clarification on the difference between the options open to us?
Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Elias or Mr. Gong?
I'll try to assist as best I can. First of all, the committee has to have sufficient information before it to be able to make a decision. So, hence, the deferral is open to them. The difficulty, as I see it, with a delegate to permit, as it seems what members are saying, there isn't sufficient information. To do a delegate to permit when you've got issues which are at the heart of the determination, it wouldn't seem appropriate in most circumstances to delegate something which is significantly material to the decision being made, because it's taking it out of the hands of the committee.
Do you want to add anything to that, Mr. Gong?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay, we're still... we have a motion on the table. It has been seconded for a deferral, so we're still in that debate. Councillor Warren, you caught my eye, so you speak next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't think it's necessary to defer. I think there's enough information here to make a decision, if I'm honest with you. We have transport experts that can tell you whether it's big enough to get a lorry round. I have an HGV. I can reverse an Arctic round there while drinking a cup of tea, if I'm honest with you. So I don't think that's an issue. You've got, and I'm not a driver anymore, but you've got people that drive all the time. I don't think that's an issue. It's commercial berms in a commercial area. You've got a great big, what we used to call a tip, now called a recycling centre next door to it. So I think there is enough there to make a decision.
Okay, thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Hodge.
Hello, I would just like to say I'd prefer a deferral as the overall outcome. Some people have mentioned a refusal, and I think if there was a refusal, there might not. The decision could be appealed, and none of us will be any clearer on the points that we've raised. And with the delegate to permit, it's also the same. There's lots of uncertainties which we would be leaving to the officer to resolve, and for those reasons I would prefer a deferral for all these things to be clarified and come back to us so that we can make a decision if that's the way the overall vote goes.
Councillor Crossley, followed by Councillor Jackson.
Yes, like Councillor Warren, I think there's a lot of information in this report, but we're talking about deferral here, and it's it should be noted that the requester for the deferral was the ward councillor. So there are a tremendous amount of issues that come from the question that people want extra information about. And this is a big application with a big impact. So what I would ask is, if we do decide to defer, can we also have a site visit? I know I don't often ask for site visits, but if we are deferring, can we go and have a look at this?
Right, I'm just checking. I can't see that one would negate the other, so just checking with the Chief Planning Officer. Would that be acceptable?
If the committee are minded to visit the site in the time between now and the next committee meeting, I see no issue with that at all, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Well, first of all, I'm astounded that Councillor Crossley wants a site visit. That underlines to me that it's really important to have a site visit, because he doesn't easily consent to site visits. And if we're going for a deferral, it seems to me very sensible, because I thought I knew this site from previous site visits for other applications, but now I've got a few questions on actual spatial dimensions, and with this question whether you can get an Arctic in or out or not, or whether you will gum up the entire works or not, or what, and so on. So I'm happy to second a resolution for a site visit if Councillor Crossley is proposing it formally. And secondly, we did do a deferral actually last year, and we put a time limit on it, and I think the concern is justified here. So I would suggest that we have a deferral and to come back within 3 months.
Right, thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Simon.
Yes, I'd been inclined to think there was enough to allow us to make a decision with delegating to permit and to put conditions in. But on reflection, I think that transparency suggests that there should be further discussions with the applicant in the light of what's been said today and brought back to committee. And if it's going to come back to committee, we might as well have a look at the site to satisfy ourselves that all vehicles that are likely to need to use the site can properly do so, both for turning and for unloading.
Thank you. Right, I think that's everybody who wishes to speak. Before we go to a vote on the two motions that have been put forward, that are complementary, they don't contradict each other. Before we vote on deferral, I just want to be sure that we're absolutely clear what we're instructing the officers to do. Now, Councillor Hughes actually made a very good list, or at least a clear list, but I just want to make sure that that's been noted, and just if there's anything else that needs to be added. So perhaps, Councillor Hughes, it would be helpful if you just, you mentioned 4 things, if we slowly go through them. So the first one was about the swept path analysis. What is it you're seeking?
So a swept path analysis for 16-metre vehicles, articulated vehicles.
Okay. Anybody want to amplify that, say anything to add to that wording? Okay. I'm just going to go through Councillor Hughes' list. Right. The next point you mentioned was about you wanted to demonstrate that there wasn't a negative impact on neighbouring businesses. Is that correct?
Yes. Make sure that it doesn't affect the viability of the existing businesses on the sites.
Is that something that can be investigated?
That's something we can ask for, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The third thing was the Class B2 use, and the fact that that includes industrial processes now or in the future. Again, I want the officer to be clear what it is we're asking the officer to do before this comes back to us. So would you like to amplify, Councillor Hughes?
Well, I believe the officer just to review that option and to see if it needed changing.
And there was concern that there needs to be, or possibly needs to be, conditions attached to any B2 use in the future. At the moment, those conditions don't exist, but they might be needed depending on the future operation of that site. So can we explore what conditions, and there was conditions to do with the time operation during the day as well. Is that clear enough for you, do you think?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The fourth thing that you mentioned, Councillor Hughes, was operation of the, or ownership, sorry, of the access road.
Yeah, ownership and use of the access roads. It's not clear. It's shown within the development sites, within the development boundary, and it's not clear of the ownership or who has the ownership or use of that access road and what rules apply to it.
Is that okay, Mr. Gom?
We can ask about that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor McPhee, is there anything that's not been listed so far that you would like the officers to sort of engage with before it comes back?
I thought about a swept path analysis for the forklift, just to see if they can unload from the site.
Okay, loading and unloading, forklift trucks, viability.
Yes, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else that we want to add to that list? Okay. Right. I'm now going to take a vote on the motion to defer, which was proposed by Councillor McPhee, seconded by Councillor Halsall. So those in favour of a deferral, please show. Against? Abstentions? None. Right, so that's carried. Right, there's also now the issue of a site visit. So those in favour, the site visit motion was proposed by, just remind me who proposed the site visit. Councillor Crossley, seconded by Councillor Jackson, thank you. Those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Right, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, so we've got a motion to defer, a motion for a site visit. We've been going an hour, just over an hour. Just going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Right, welcome back after our short break. We're now going to look at the second item today, which is planning application 23/02945/TCA Orchard Cottage, Dover's Lane, Bathford, Bath, and invite the case officer, Jane Brewer, to present her report.
Thank you, Chair. This actually relates to a notification to undertake tree works in a conservation area. So we received 6 weeks' notice to fell a tree. This tree actually is in Bathford Conservation Area. It's actually a dead tree, which would normally be exempt from the 6 weeks notification process. But it's been brought to you today to ensure that the planning scheme of delegation is complied with and that full transparency in decision-making is demonstrated because this relates to a member of staff. So this is the location of the property. Just off the, you'll see that Dover's Lane is just to the south of the property, and this is the main route through Bathford. The red dot denotes where the position of the tree, which is readily visible from Dover's Lane, just adjacent to it. Photographs showing a very dead tree. It's only about 4 metres high. Couldn't establish what had caused the death of the tree. I think that's it. The officer's recommendation is no objection, raised based on the reasons outlined in the committee report, with advisory notes relating to replacement planting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There are no public speakers on this item. I invite members to ask any questions they have to the case officer. So does anybody have any questions? Councillor Halsall. And then Councillor Jackson.
Just to confirm, we aren't able legally to impose any condition to replace the tree, but it's something we can advise and hope that the applicant will be happy to oblige.
Technically, with a dead tree, the removal of a dead tree, there is a standard obligation to replant. If it wasn't a dead tree, then there wouldn't be a standard obligation and we couldn't condition it. But in this case, not only are they keen to replant, they've actually indicated they would like to plant a rowan tree.
Councillor Jackson.
Well, that was just exactly the question I was going to ask, so thank you for such a full answer. But I would like it noted that even a dead tree can be quite an important ecosystem, with the pigeons not really discriminating about where they nest. They're particularly fond of cypresses.
Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody want to propose a motion? Councillor Warren.
Thank you. I move that we accept the officer's recommendation to permit.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Simon? Anybody want to speak to the motion? In that case, we'll go straight to the vote. So we have a motion to support the officer's recommendation to permit, and Councillor Warren, and seconded by Councillor Simon. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Yep, that's unanimous. Thank you. Right, so we move on now to the... thank you to the case officer. Thank you. We move on now to the appeals report. Any questions or comments on the appeals report? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit dismayed to see that we haven't had our usual success rate on appeals, and more have been permitted than usual, but I'm trusting that's just a quirk of circumstances. But I was just wondering about the Hillside Farm one, where this is obviously, I didn't have time to look it up. I assume this is a Greenbelt issue. The appeal has been dismissed, so what is the next step? Are we going to order demolition, or what's going to happen? Application, sorry, I should have...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this was an application, a retrospective application for a double garage at Timsbury, or near Timsbury. The site's in the Greenbelt, so it was refused because it was deemed to be inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. As it says, the appeal was dismissed. as the agenda says, the reports. So the file has been passed back to our enforcement team, and they will be deciding what the best course of action will be. I wouldn't like to say today that there would definitely be a requirement for the building to be demolished, because that's obviously a decision that's yet to be taken, but I imagine it will be going in that direction, Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Gurley?
I'm not sure if this is the right moment. Do variations that have been requested on decisions that have been made come back to committee automatically, or do they need to be called in by the ward councillor?
Did you get that question? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. No. An application to vary a planning permission is dealt with as a completely fresh planning application, even if the original had been before committee. So the scheme of delegation doesn't require those variation applications to come back to committee simply because the original was at committee. So in terms of the scheme of delegation, they would need to be treated in exactly the same way as any other application.
Right, just to be absolutely clear then, councillors would need to call that in to committee with planning reasons why in the usual way.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jackson.
Well, I've raised this concern. I've had a number of complaints from the neighbours of development sites that they have not been informed about the planning application. The one in particular I emailed about, Councillor Hopkins. The information arrived yesterday, how many weeks after our Westfield Planning Committee? But it is a matter of concern, as I said, because the immediate neighbours of they've all been domestic applications, are not getting the information in speedy times. And had Councillor Hopkins been an ordinary member of the public, he would have missed the Westfield Parish Council committee meeting at which the application was considered. So if we can get these, or of course it may be the postal system, if we could try and establish what's going on, I'd be very grateful and perhaps get fewer irate phone calls.
Yes, something similar happened in my ward earlier this month, earlier this year. So yes, we do need to be sure that it's not a fault of anything here at Baines. Right. Councillor Hopp, did you have anything? No, just nodding. Right. Any more questions? Yes, I was going to say. The date of the site visit is scheduled for Monday the 9th of October, but we'll obviously need to, have that confirmed. And the next meeting takes place on Wednesday the 18th of October. So thank you very much for everyone coming in today, especially such a wet morning, and thank you for your deliberations. The meeting is now closed.